Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, we're going to go live now to Downing Street and Brussels, and first to Sky's Tom Rayner, who has a report about the tricky position in which Theresa May now finds herself.
She survived a leadership challenge from within her own ranks, put a torrid conference speech behind her, but the new week brings new and significant challenges. As the latest round of Brexit negotiations gets underway in Brussels, the Prime Minister will update MPs in Westminster on the progress since her Florence speech, the intervention that was intended to break the deadlock. She'll tell the Commons, as we look forward to the next stage, the ball is in their court, but I am optimistic we will achieve a positive response by approaching these negotiations in a constructive way, in a spirit of friendship and cooperation, and with our sights firmly set on the future. I believe we can prove the doomsayers wrong. But MPs are unlikely to allow the Prime Minister's optimism to go unchecked. Over the weekend, reports suggested both France and Germany were determined to play hardball, ruling out discussing the transition period that had been at the heart of the Florence speech until the very end of negotiations. These mounting pressures will no doubt be seized upon by Labour as they respond to the Prime Minister later.
The government have been alienating the other side of these negotiations for many months, and now, quite frankly, not simply because of Boris Johnson, but also because of the disaster that the Conservative Party had last week at their conference and the subsequent attempt at a coup. Those with whom the government has to negotiate abroad are looking at this country, they're laughing, they're saying they don't know what they're doing.
Although Brexit will dominate this week, the government is hoping to press on with its domestic plans, putting forward an energy bill with a pledge to cap prices. But that too could see Conservative rebellions against an idea seen by some as a stolen Labour policy. And all of this will be played out against a backdrop of speculation of an imminent reshuffle, a potential shake-up that will be as much a test of the Prime Minister's authority as a demonstration of it. Tom Rayner, Sky News in Westminster.
And Tom Rayner joins us now live from Downing Street. Tom, how is this latest leak of Boris Johnson's support for the Prime Minister playing out?
Well, as you said, Adam, it has captured the attention on another day when the Prime Minister wanted to move the debate forward to refocus things on Brexit as Parliament returns, and she updates MPs on progress since that Florence speech where she set out the government's position. But what is happening, although Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, didn't answer reporters' questions about all the various reshuffle rumours that have been swirling since the Sunday newspapers came out yesterday, he has sent a message to that Conservative Party WhatsApp group, which in theory is private but is seemingly being leaked almost daily now. He'd used it before, hadn't he, to profess his loyalty, saying it was now time for the party to circle the wagons around the Prime Minister. Today, he's trying to distance himself from the comments that were in the Telegraph and the Sun this morning, suggesting that allies of his were suggesting that he would just simply say no if the Prime Minister were to move him in a reshuffle. But beyond simply distancing himself from those comments, he's also made the allegation in that WhatsApp message that there may be some kind of black op against him in this, that he describes the people who are briefing the newspapers as potentially being a sinister band of imposters. So it's adding another level of intrigue, which is why it's being focused on so heavily now.
We've heard from the Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon, talking about the Foreign Secretary.
But let me assure you, the Cabinet is not divided. We're behind the Prime Minister. You'll hear her reporting to Parliament today. We all support the speech she made in Florence, setting out the government's approach to the Brexit negotiations. And after last week's conference, we're all getting behind her.
And you're behind the Foreign Secretary as well?
Yes, we're a united Cabinet as one. We're behind the Prime Minister.
And the Foreign Secretary?
And the Foreign Secretary.
Yet, Tom, the Sunday Times reported that 3 cabinet ministers thought Mrs May should go after her speech last week.
Yeah, I think there is some indication that the Grant Shapps plot, which was exposed by the Whip's office, turned out to be a pretty shrewd piece of political operation by the party whips, because if the implications of that Sunday Times article that you're talking about are correct, that there was a much more serious plot potentially in the offing that was basically seen off by Number 10 by forcing those figures who might have been potentially more lethal to the Prime Minister if they had come out against her to decide whether or not they were going to associate themselves with a figure like Grant Shapps, who has not always been the most popular figure, despite being a former party chairman. But I think all of this is a problem for the government. The fact that you have to keep on having people come out and saying the cabinet is unified will raise the question of why people are continually asking that. Certainly, we think that Labour will be asking those questions, and indeed their arguments about the Brexit strategy, which we will no doubt hear after the Prime Minister delivers her update to MPs in the Commons later, is that it is precisely this kind of infighting, this kind of posturing, which is holding up those negotiations in Brussels. Because how could the EU Commission and indeed the chief negotiator Michel Barnier have confidence in the team that he is negotiating with if he doesn't think that necessarily there is political stability? So Theresa May will probably try and allay some of those fears. She will tell the House of Commons that her Florence speech set out quite clearly the government's position. It addressed some of the concerns of the EU, and now it is for them to be flexible and to be constructive. But no doubt she will be dogged by these questions nonetheless.
Tom, thank you. Well, let's put that to our Brussels correspondent, our correspondent in Brussels, Mark Stone. I mean, Mark, these negotiations are meant to start today again. David Davis is not there, and of course the head civil servant of the group, of the British side, recently moved jobs as well. So are things progressing at all?
Yes, that civil servant, Ollie Robbins, we think is here, but of course with a different hat on. He was the right-hand man to David Davis in the department for exiting the European Union. That is how they have got used to him. That is the job they've got used to him in here in Brussels. But a couple of weeks ago, Theresa May moved him from that department to another department within the umbrella of Number 10 itself. That will add to the confusion here in Brussels as to who it is precisely they are dealing with. What sort of Brexit do they expect Britain will want? It goes to the heart of what Bernard Jenkin was saying to you earlier on this morning, that if in the British government there is confusion about what sort of Brexit Britain is looking for, that confusion extends right the way over here to the heart of the European Commission. They don't know what game Britain is playing, and I suppose on one level that stalls the negotiations. On another level, it allows the EU side to play for time, because they can say, well, look, we can hold our cards close because the game is effectively not being played at full throttle at the moment. That's the situation as it is at the moment. David Davis is not here today. Usually in the previous 4 rounds he'd turn up on day one. There'd be a grand gesture by him and by Michel Barnier about the week ahead and the progress that they would make. He's not here this time. I asked the Commission if they were concerned about that. No, they're not, they say, but maybe they're being diplomatic about that. On a technical level, negotiations are ongoing. The technocrats who work for both sides are continuing to work through these key difficult divorce issues, the Irish border, citizens' rights and the financial settlement. I understand that this week there are fewer negotiators from the British side here. I'm told that is because they are concentrating on fewer key sticking points. I think what we can read into that is the fact that although citizens around the continental Europe and in the UK may feel as though on the citizens' rights issue little progress has been made, I think behind the scenes a lot of progress has been made. It's just that neither side has actually agreed on that progress, but you know, that they are moving, both sides are moving. Again, on the Irish border, no, they haven't decided what the border will look like. They haven't defined that border, but they have agreed on issues like the common travel movement across that border and other key Northern Irish issues. So progress made on those 2 areas. The sticking point remains the exit bill, and that is what I think they will be focusing on in great detail. One other aside, Adam, that I would make. I've just spent the weekend in Germany, and I was talking to a lot of different people there and having a look at the German press over the weekend, it's so hard to find any mention of Brexit. This is not an issue around Europe in the same way that it is in the UK. Looking around here now, there are no other journalists talking about Brexit. There was a crew here from Danish television a few moments ago. They were referring to Brexit because their finance minister today was suggesting, or over the weekend, was suggesting that perhaps he wants things to move a bit quicker than his colleagues in Germany and France might do. So they're dealing with that specific domestic issue for Brexit from them. But this is not a massive issue around Europe in the same way that it is and continues to be in the UK. That's a problem. If Britain can't keep the issue at the top of the headlines in Europe, then how can they expect to get a good deal from a European Union who is at the moment not conceding on anything and playing a very, very hard game indeed?
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Well, the former Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, of course, of the Liberal Democrats, says there's still a chance to stop Brexit if it fails to deliver what the public expects. Here's his book, How to Stop Brexit. He's with me now. Seriously?
And Make Britain Great Again is the read out the rest of the title.
Yeah, that's very Trumpian.
No, what I'm saying is, and I would have thought this should appeal to people regardless of whether they voted Brexit or Remain, is that in a mature democracy such as ours, if the British people have been promised this great utopia, which we were, with 350 million quid a week for the NHS, a VAT cut, a cornucopia of new trade deals which would instantly be available and would outweigh any trade lost in our big markets in Europe, and so on and so forth. If none of that turns out to be true, and it's one of the reasons I'm now free to write these books. I accept you need to wait until Theresa May and David Davis come forward with whatever threadbare deal they've cobbled together next year. But I think it's pretty clear already that there's absolutely no way that they're going to be able to deliver on any of those principal promises. Surely then, in a mature democracy, our MPs on our behalf should say, well, hang on a minute,
we just stay there then?
Well, no, clearly you then have a period of turbulence, and then you need to ask yourself how, and which we should have asked ourselves, by the way, but it's very important, this. We should have asked ourselves, I think, straight after the referendum, we can't turn the clock back. I'm not one of those so-called Ramonas who think we can turn the clock back to the 22nd of June 2016. I do believe, however, there is a chance, and Emmanuel Macron has said this recently in public, lots of European leaders tell me this in private, there is a way back for the United Kingdom, not to be in the heart of the European Union, to be in an outer orbit of the European Union.
That's the problem, because, you know, we had Jean-Claude Juncker give his State of the European Union address, and he spelt out a future of an integrated Eurozone with its own parliament, its own finance minister, one president of the European Union. I mean, if we were still in the European Union, we'd never sign up to that, would we?
No, nor did we. Here's of course, one of the myths that has been put about by the Brexiteers is that we were in this sort of suffocating straitjacket. We were never in the single currency. We were never in Schengen. We were never party to a lot of measures that we didn't want to be. And I think that where the European Union is now heading is, interestingly enough, and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, going to provide us with a big opportunity, because the European Union is going to move. If you listen, much more, by the way, much more important to listen to Macron than to Juncker. Many of his ideas won't actually come about. But Macron's idea, if it gets the support of the Germans, will lead to a greater sort of integration, a sort of federal core.
I mean, what Macron also said is he saw that, you know, 10 years ahead. He didn't see it happening.
No, I don't
now.
think he did, actually. I think many people now accept that for the Eurozone, the single currency, of which we are not a part, of which we would never be a part, will become a much more integrated core to the European Union.
But in that sense, we shouldn't sweat it, because it's going to happen anyway. I mean, this is just an important stage of decoupling, and then we can...
so we quit, lose all the leverage that we have of being in a member, and then trying to...
Well, we've lost that already. I mean, we're on the way out. They say we're leaving.
No, we're not out yet.
We say we're leaving, they say we're leaving.
We're not out yet, and MPs, here's the crucial thing. Theresa May, under pressure, by the way, from a court ruling, has accepted, rightly, we live in a representative democracy, that MPs should be able to make a judgment about whether what is being put to them by the government is consistent with what their constituents were promised.
Yeah, but the question is what the alternative is.
And the alternative
might be hard Brexit. We're not going to do this deal. We're simply going to sever our ties.
No, that's far too pessimistic. What I'm saying, I'm a much more positive approach, and I set out in the book a proposal that John Major and Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, should be asked to sketch out a new approach in which we don't, in a sense, turn the clock back. We don't enter into the core of the European Union, but we don't equally sort of consign ourselves to some distant corner of outer space. And I think you can do that by re-entering what I'd call a sort of outer orbit of the reformed European Union in the years ahead.
They used to be your colleagues in government. Is the Cabinet united, as we were just hearing from Michael Fallon there?
No, look, they're all over the shop. I mean, they're doing what all parties and governments do. You've seen it many times over the years. They curdle when they've been there for too long. When they've run out of ideas, they start turning in on themselves, and you get this peculiar. It's a sort of form of political narcissism, really, where people who the public have never heard of before suddenly become sort of two-minute wonders on the news.
Liberal Democrats.
Well, that's slightly unfair, but you know what I mean. The government, the party of government, when it's really run out of road, just starts becoming ever more inward-looking, ever more introverted. Yeah. I mean, I'm a politician, ex-politician. I follow politics. Yeah. Even I'm losing interest in all these endless twists and turns.
So does that mean you think we're heading towards a Labour government?
Well, I think we're heading towards. I think we're in a period of repeated convulsions in British politics. The moment that the British public was sold, and I don't blame the public for this because they voted for a Brexit utopia. I mean, in a sense, I might disagree with it. I totally understand why people voted for pots more money for the NHS and so on, because that's what they were told by people like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove they would get. It was emblazoned on that bus. Yeah. But the moment that the Brexiteers basically lied to the British people and won, we were condemning ourselves as a country to a long period of political instability.
But people also voted to take back control, and maybe they're going to get that.
Well, no, they're not. Here's the great fallacy. So one of the greatest assertions made by Johnson, Farage, Gove and the rest was by leaving the European Union, we would finally get control over our own borders. Guess what's going to happen? We've now created a new land border in Ireland with the European Union. We never had that before.
Well, not yet. We say we're not going to have it, but I mean...
No, we will. The Republic of Ireland is in the European Union. We'll be out of it, according to the Brexiteers. So there'll be a new land border between the United Kingdom and the European Union, which doesn't presently exist. And then, get this, far from taking back control of that border, the government's now saying, no, we don't want to take control of that border. So even on the most vital issue of taking control of our borders, we're creating a border over which the Brexiteers themselves then say they don't want to have any control. And so, on time and time again, issue after issue, what people were legitimately led to expect by these cast of characters, these Brexiteers, turns out not to be true. Of course that creates political turbulence. I think that turbulence will continue until the Brexiteers are held to account for the fibs and the misinformation that they peddle to the British
final
people.
question then. What do you think the odds are that we are going to, quote, stop Brexit, as you say?
I can't put odds on. I'll tell you one thing. I put quite a lot of odds, though, on us not going towards the Brexit, the government thing. I think it's unsustainable. They're on a path now which is unsustainable. That's why we need to look for positive alternatives, and that's what my book seeks to do.
So it might be hard Brexit rather than stopping Brexit?
No, I think what we should aim for is a different form of membership of the United Kingdom in a reformed European Union.
OK, the book is How to Stop Brexit and Make Britain Great Again from Bodley Head.
I've been